Welcome to the blog. This will be a continuation of our program on Appalling Twistianity. Before I get to return to the concluding lines of the 89th Mizmor, which conclusively prove that Christianity is a fraud, as it does prove Judaism is a fraud as well, I'd like to speak to the events of yesterday and today. I am apolitical, which means I don't really care two hoots for who prevails in a political election anywhere in the world. I am anti-religious. I condemn all religions with great passion because God hates religion, and that's my job. So with that introduction, I will also tell you that when I criticize someone, it should be known that I don't fit the typical pattern. If I'm going to criticize someone on the right, it's not because I'm on the left. If I criticize somebody on the left, it's not because I'm on the right. I do not participate in politics, but I do criticize politics. And I typically leave my criticism of politics for those things that affect my interests. And my interests are the survival of the state of Israel, the safety of Jews worldwide, the acknowledgement of Yahweh by name and his zeal to get people to walk away from religion, and the very salvation of the planet. So I care about things like the Ukraine war because I know how dangerous it is to the very survival of humankind. Yesterday, a social influencer, a man that I never listened to, and ever once. I didn't even know who he was, to show you how out of that circle I am, but his name was Charlie Kirk. He was assassinated. He is being called by MAGAs as the greatest voice for truth and hope in the United States. The reason I never listened to him is I don't care for social influencers. I think that the whole thing is a ridiculous racket. And I never once listened to any one of his shows. Now that's changed because he is the face of X and of Facebook today. And I am on these platforms for a singular reason. My job is to awaken Israelites, Jews, to the realization that Yahweh has a name, it's Yahweh, and that he has a beloved son, our Savior and King, and it's Dode and not Jesus. And that there's very little time left for them to get their perspective right, pursuant to God, because we only have 8 years before the Messiah Dode returns. And I have written 35 books to prove my conclusions in this regard, 5 of which do the most comprehensive job ever in disproving the notion that Allah was a god, or that Muhammad was a prophet, or that Islam is anything more than a death cult. That series of books is called Goddamn Religion. They're all free at yadayah.com. Collectively 4,200 pages of irrefutable evidence. I've done the same thing to Christianity with 5 volumes, just shy of 4,000 pages of absolute proof that Jesus never existed, that Paul conceived him, and that Paul was a demon-possessed liar. That series is what we're talking about here in our Rainbow Studio. I've also written 3 books, the Babel series, to prove that rabbinical Judaism is a farce. Although I will tell you, rabbis do a very fine job of that on their own when you just post their claims. Over the last 24 hours, I have listened to some 50 interviews with Charlie Kirk. And I will say that they range from fair to terrible. Now, understand. I'm sorry the man's dead. He had a family and children. He certainly did not deserve to be shot. And I applaud everyone's right to be able to speak out freely and to live their lives. I'm a huge advocate of free speech and free will. But since he is now the number one story in the news, and he made his living as an influencer, and he is being used to promote all manner of crazy things, I do want to address several issues. One is that it's almost sad the level of devotion that the pro-Israel sites show the man. And I say this because it's as if Israel has developed this deep desire for any kind of public support, that Israel is so longing to be received favorably that if a man takes 10% of his words and speaks positively of Israel in that 10%, even if he condemns Israel and Jews and the other 90%, he's a goddamn saint. And that's what I'm seeing on all of the Israeli accounts. Even though Charlie Kirk condemned Netanyahu, Netanyahu praised him. Even though his last interview on Israel, there was two actually, one where he is insinuating that Israel is involved in ethnic cleansing. Didn't say it outright, but he certainly tried to infer it with his guest and framed it that way. And an earlier interview that is probably his most famous at the moment, he actually said that Netanyahu orchestrated the attack on October 7th, and that he did so because of a constitutional crisis, not being smart enough to know that Israel doesn't even have a constitution, because of the protests on judicial reform. Not aware, evidently, that Israel is 80-20 in this regard. 80% of Israelis lean right to far right, and 20% of Israelis lean left to Marxist. Judicial reform was not a threat to overturn the Netanyahu government. Judicial reform, the protests, certainly made it easier for the Muslims to attack on 10/7. But let's be absolutely clear. When Charlie Kirk blamed Netanyahu for being responsible for 10/7 in his interview, saying that he did it to survive the judicial reform protests, that's an abysmal lie. And the fact of the matter is that Alaska Flood, as the plan was conceived, was written prior to the first of the pro-judicial reform advocacies. Long before it. Second, Alaska Flood is a quotation from the Quran. It was an entirely Muslim plan. Now, while Netanyahu can be blamed for the government's exceedingly slow response to 10/7, and so can the Mossad, so can the Shin Bet, so can the IDF. You know, if I were empowered, I would have fired every leader of the IDF, every leader of the Mossad, every leader of the Shin Bet, and the entire Netanyahu government. I would have fired them all, because of their unwillingness to respond to what had become a reasonably obvious threat, They had the document for Alaska flood and took 8 to 12 hours to respond. I think it's tragic. So I'm going to say that the response to 10/7 was horrid. But that is so far from saying that Netanyahu, rather than Muslims, are responsible for the murderous rapes, kidnappings, and murders of 10/7, that I'm appalled that pro-Israeli sites are heralding this man as, may his memory be a blessing. There's something deeply wrong with Israel that you can't make these kinds of moral judgments anymore. Here's a man that in recent interviews blamed Jews primarily. He says Jews are the number one reason that there are open borders in America and that there is no curtailment to the influx of immigrants into America. That's simply not true, but that was his claim. He was very vocal on the Epstein files, and yet his automatic go-to statement was to say that Epstein was a front for Israeli intelligence. It's simply not true. Epstein was a philanderer when it came to all institutions and women. He was more of a consultant to the CIA and FBI than any other international agency, but he was also a consultant to the largest, most powerful, there we have some light. Wow, okay.
Let there be light.
Yeah, it was said, let there be light, and there was light.
Thank you, Kevin.
He was a consultant to the stars of banking and business around the world. And heads of state sought his ear and mouth. Mossad was at very best an exceedingly minor player. And it's all to drive the same narrative, this conspiratorial narrative that has been so disastrous for Israel and Jews over these years. And to not see it and to sanctify the man, there's something deeply wrong with that. Now, I also want to talk about the young Ukrainian girl that was murdered by a likely insane black man. We have the likes of Andrew Tate, who is a raging anti-Semite and racist, misogynist. Echoing Elon Musk's appeal to invest tens of thousands of dollars each, millions all total, in billboards with her image. Why? I mean, it's sad that she was killed. She didn't deserve to be killed. But the fact is that her murder was essentially meaningless in the overall scope of things. It was a one-off by an insane man. He didn't have a sinister plot. He wasn't part of a conspiratorial group. He wasn't living out a religious jihad fantasy. He wasn't an enraged Marxist. He's just one stupid, immoral, criminal thug. He's been arrested. He'll be tried. He will likely not be convicted by reason of insanity. And so what's the issue? Why is it that so many people are fixated on this just because they have pictures, just because she was pretty, just because they can show a sexy picture of her next to an ugly picture of Brown, her assailant? I mean, the undercurrent of racism that is so charged in that is simply a serious problem. And how it dominated X, as if that murder was symbolic of something. And then the little clerk of the court, black woman that had been assigned to that position, and she's not a judge. She's just a magistrate of the court. I don't even know if she had a college education. Was she qualified for that job? No. Should she have the job? No. But the fact is that Brown had been convicted only once, tried and convicted once. He was tried and convicted of armed robbery, served 5 years for armed robbery, released after that. He had been arrested a number of times after that for rather nasty behavior. It is, unless the crime is murder or rape, and that this person poses a clear and imminent danger to society, it is exceedingly rare for a judge or a magistrate not to release the person on bail pending trial. And in his case, on most of the arrests, the grand jury either did not convene, or it did convene and it deemed that there wasn't enough evidence to justify a trial, or they determined that because of his statements in previous arrests or on that arrest, that he was likely insane, and therefore there was no purpose to a trial, because unfortunately America has a policy that you can be innocent by reason of insanity, as opposed to guilty and insane. And so this notion that this woman should be somehow harassed and condemned as a sign of wokeness in America, and that had this woman not granted his release after an arrest, that the Iranian immigrant would somehow be alive, is just utter nonsense. And now you've got Musk saying we need to go to war. We need to fight. They won't let us live. We must fight. Who? Who is it that you want to fight? How? Why? Where? What's your justification? Who's your enemy? And why are you trying to divide our already divided nation so that no one can get along anymore? X has become an absolute swamp of misinformation, of racial hatred, of gross anti-Semitism. You know, it's a place where both Marxists and MAGAs and conspiratorialists thrive. You know, I heard Alex Brown get all hot under the collar and says that Charlie Kirk was killed by liberal Democrats. And then you see the other side of X. Charlie Hurt was killed as a Mossad operation by Zionists. And the sites that are promoting this kind of nonsense have hundreds of thousands or millions of followers. I don't think I've ever been quite as disgusted with humanity as I have been under these two incidences. I mean, again, I feel sorry that the young lady was killed. It's an absolute shame. And when you look at Brown's personal history, his brother and his father, I mean, it is just one disastrous, immoral, vicious act after another. Horrible people. Something is seriously wrong in that family. The world would have been better off without them. That is for absolute sure. And I'm not a fan for liberal judicial policies that have been promoted throughout America, and particularly in liberal environments, and the whole DEI initiative. I think it's repulsive. But if that is your foe, then don't fight it with guttural, racist overtures. Don't fight it with portraits of the killed Ukrainian girl. Don't fight it with the portraits of a lowly magistrate. Fight it by saying, this is the consequence of appointing liberal judges who have no commitment to justice or the Constitution. Identify those judges that you think don't fit your narrative, and promote elections for replacements and for district attorneys and all the other kind of political people that run for office. But I'm here to tell you, you're going to fail. You know why you're going to fail? Because America is growing considerably more liberal. Why? Because the last 2 generations have been indoctrinated in Marxism to the point that they're incapable of morality and incapable of forming an intelligent conclusion about anything. And so you're going to lose. And the more time that goes by, the more overwhelming the loss is going to be. So, the fact is that there is no remedy for this. Your life would be better spent promoting something else and not trying to bait a race war. As for Elon Musk, I was so impressed with Elon a year ago and all that he had achieved. I thought he was the greatest mind and inventor I'd ever seen in business, ever. And I thought that he was going to make X a bastion of free speech. Come to find out, X is the most restrictive, least free, most corrupt, anti-Semitic and racist, untruthful of all of the social media platforms. It's the worst, not the best. And it's gotten worse progressively. And when Elon Musk made the grave mistake of supporting Trump and got involved in politics, at which he was really bad, he put a target on himself. He did what he should not have done. I begged him at the time. I was new to X. I wrote letter after letter to Elon and saying, this is what's going to happen to you around Trump. And it happened exactly as I said and when I said it would. And yet he doesn't seem to have learned the lesson. There's something that happened with him a year ago that he is not recovered from. And here's a man that had all the potential in the world that I thought should be admired, and he's just made a mess of it. And he's egging people on now to go out and fight. Fight whom? How? Why? Where? I just thought that you ought to hear why I'm so frustrated with social media, why I'm so frustrated with the way America is responding. And all the while, you have 2 other problems that are deeply concerning. One is the continued confabulation by Donald Trump and the fact that he is owned and operated by Qatar and Saudi Arabia. His response to the Israeli botched attempt at killing the top Hamas operatives, and I've got no problem with Israel bombing in Qatar to kill Hamas, but if you're going to do it, you damn well better get it right, and it appears that they did not. But Trump's response to that was horrid. It's almost like he was looking for the chance to bail on Israel, to demand an end to their war to capitulate to Hamas and then agree to a fake Palestinian state in the upcoming United Nations conclave. What he had to say was deeply, deeply troubling. And yet I didn't see a single pro-Israeli site pick up on it. Second, there's something deeply bothersome about Netanyahu's war in Gaza. It continues to do the same thing. Topple one building after another, leaving all of Gaza in rubble. And all the while, the world turns against Israel. Israel has lost the war of public opinion. And that matters because you can't survive in this world isolated. And all the while, the war goal, which was to eliminate Hamas, to disarm Hamas, to drive Hamas out of Gaza, has failed utterly. And I told Israel in my open letter to Israel the week of 10/7 of 23 that it would fail miserably, that with bullets and bombs, they would manufacture more Islamic terrorists than they killed. And that's exactly what has happened. There is no degradation in the number of Muslims who are armed in Gaza and want to kill Jews than there were when we began. And so when you are destructive and you make a bad situation worse and you have war goals that are unachievable, it is suicidal for a country. And that's where Israel finds itself. And the consequence is going to be a fake Palestinian state is going to be imposed on Israel, and Israel's going to be indefensible once that happens. And the next Alaska flood is going to be 1,000 times worse. This is the reality. This is the consequence of having done that. All the while, the world is looking at World War III. You've got Donald Trump now trying to condemn Putin for a war that America started. And you've got all of the EU up in arms wanting to go to war against Russia when this is a NATO-started war. And Russia has won the war. And if people don't wise up in a real hurry and stop arming Ukraine, you're going to lose Europe and maybe the United States. That's what's at stake. And then you've got the United States now with Trump, with his tariffs and his sanctions and his ICE patrols, such that he is literally cratering the U.S. economy. It is so egregious, it's hard not to see it as purposeful. America is poised for economic collapse. And it's inevitable. And it's imminent. So that's what I wanted to get off my chest before we began. I'm now going to return to what Yahweh said in his concluding comments in the 89th Mizmor. This one psalm by itself is sufficient to eliminate any credibility for the religions of Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. It is a powerful testament to Yahweh's enduring love and support for his firstborn and only son, Dode David, for his chosen one, Dode, for the former and returning king, Dode, for our Savior, Dode, for the one who enabled the benefits of the covenant, Dode, for the one who served as the sacrificial lamb of Passover, Dode. It's not hidden. It's not symbolic. It's laid right out there that Dode is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. He is our Savior, and he is the former and returning King. And God says so bluntly, this conveys this message. He says to make any other claim, like a Bar Kokhba, or a Jesus Christ, or a Muhammad, is to call Yahweh a liar. So Yahweh's concluding statements, they speak volumes. He is declaring for all of us to recognize that his love, his affection, and his mercy are best demonstrated and understood when we consider his relationship with his beloved Son, our Messiah and King, Daud. Further, the covenant is most accurately presented, affirmed, and verified when we examine Daud's participation through the lives and through his lives and through his lyrics. And this all begins with Gara. Father and Son have invited us into the covenant family, and we have been, I should say, Kara. Kara is to be invited, to be welcomed, to read, to recite. It is the basis of the Moed Mikre. The Mikre is plural for Mikra, and Mikra is Ma and Kara combined, which means to ponder the implications of these invitations to meet with God. So Father and Son have invited us into the covenant. We have been called out of this world so we can be welcomed into the seventh dimensions of heaven. By reading and reciting the word of God, we find Father and Son summoning us to their side. When we capitalize on what they have done through the Mikre to deliver the benefits of the covenant, we grow exponentially. Daud has shown us the way. Those who are going to escape this planet alive, follow him. Yahweh will remain attuned to Daud forevermore because he loves him as a father loves a son. God said, Chesed ane wa bereth ane aman lahu. My unwavering love, unrelenting devotion, and enduring mercy are truthfully presented and reliably endure with him as part of my covenant family. That being the case, you should not be awaiting an unknown Messiah, Israel. That being the case, you should not be worshiping a false Messiah, Christians. Even when they act up, parents seldom tire of their children. And when a child grows up to devote themselves to the betterment of the family, when they're about their father's business, every moment is a cause for celebration. This is not only why we have children, it is why we exist. It's why God created us. According to Yahweh, Daud is the most interesting man in the world. We devalue him and Yah's relationship with him at our peril. By contrast, if we do as Yahweh does and Shamar, closely examine and carefully consider his every word and deed, we will endure forever. God wants us to follow the example he has set. He said that he Shamar Daud, that he closely examines and carefully considers everything about the man. And when we do the same, we will enjoy the same result. Based upon what Yahweh has to say about Daud, it is prudent that we listen to him and follow his example. He said, this is God speaking, I will establish his seed, that which he sows, preparing his offspring for the harvest, Zerah. Through the restoring witness and by way of the eternal testimony forevermore, Layad, as an everlasting and enduring witness. His throne, his position of power and seat of honor will be equated to the days of heaven. Ka Yom Shamayim will be as time in the spiritual realm, which is everlasting. Mizmor, lyrics to sing, Psalm 89:29. So here is God saying, I'm going to establish Daud's seed, that which he sows, preparing his offspring for the harvest, Zerah. I'm going to do so through the restoring witness. Do you know who the restoring witness is? Do you know who is the one who is sowing and cultivating the seeds that Daud has scattered through the words of his Mizmor, such that you can be part of the covenant family? You should. Do you know why Yahweh is saying that he's establishing Dod's seed, preparing his offspring for the harvest? Do you know what the two harvests are? Do you know that they are Bokurim, Shabua, Teruah? Do you know what occurs on those dates? Do you care? Do you know why a restoring witness was called to convey this message to you? Why would God say that Dod's throne will be equated to the days of heaven, of Shamayim, if it were not true? And how does time flow in the seventh dimension? It doesn't. All time exists in the seventh dimension. Heck, just by the time you get to the fullness of the fourth dimension, all time exists. And the seventh dimension, it's even hard to imagine how Dod's throne is going to be so extraordinary. It's, from the three dimensions that we're in now, it's infinity times infinity times infinity times infinity to get to the seventh dimension. And that is how he's equating the throne of Dod. It's not the throne that you would find of the seat of St. Peter and the Vatican. No, this isn't the throne of some potentate in the United States, the throne of Donald Trump when he goes takes a dump. No, that's not what we're talking about here. This is a throne that is positioned in Shamayim, and it belongs to Dod. If heaven's throne belongs to Dod, how can there be a Bar Kokhba? How can you have a Jesus? How can you have a Muhammad? How can you have a New Testament, a Quran, or a Talmud? God is saying Dod's seat of honor is equated to, is like the days of heaven where time exists forever and is so expansive that it would boggle our comprehension to even conceive of it. Not just saying that Dod has a throne here on earth, which he will, but his seat of power is in heaven with God. Oh, by the way, how is that possible? Since Paul said that not only was David Dod dead and buried, rotting in his grave, but that he was excluded from heaven. Why did he say that? Why did he lie in that regard? Because he had a lie to sell of his own. He had the lie of Jesus Christ to sell. And so he had to rob everything that was said about Dod and give it to his pretend God. But guess what Mizmor he never cited from? The 89th. Why? Because it condemns everything he had to say. He didn't cite from the 22nd either, because it tells you exactly who was the one who was crucified in 33 CE and who went into hell to save us. They didn't even quote Isaiah 9. You know why they didn't quote Isaiah 9? Because it tells you the name of the son who was given to us. His name is Dod. The covenant's children are the beneficiaries of what Dod has sown, and as such, we are his offspring. The legacy of the harvest he enabled. Through the Son, the Father has conceived the perfect family. He is the one looking forward to raising us while sharing all that his Son has to give. As a result, the Son's place of honor and his offspring shall endure forevermore as the covenant's children. It is because Dod fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim. And by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bokurim, he made the souls of the covenant's children immortal. He perfected our souls by carrying our guilt and depositing it in Sheol, never to be seen again. And then he signed our adoption papers so that as the Bakor, firstborn, we could join him as Bokurim, firstborn children. These are what equates what he has done to the days of heaven. And to this end, Yahweh intends to deploy a restoring witness, and he has now deployed him. He has chosen him. He has educated him. He has enabled him. And you're listening to him. And he is in love with the author of the eternal testimony. And he is devoted to his beloved son. This song needs to be sung. We now know that the spiritual abode of God has a seat of honor, indeed a throne, one with Dode's name written on it. Therefore, not just throughout the millennial kingdom will we expect to see Dode's shepherd his flock, but in heaven as well. Now, the reason that that's important is that as we approach Shabuah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah in years 2026, 2027, and 2033, a year from now, 2 years from now, 8 years from now, there are different kinds of people. There are the covenant members who are going to have access to Shamayim. They'll become seven-dimensional. Those are the beneficiaries of the Shabuah harvest and the Teruah gleaning. And Dode will be our king in the spiritual realm of Shamayim. Then there are those who will be brought into Jerusalem, both Goyim and also Yehudim. They're different classes and different purposes that will receive the benefit of the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah on Teruah, so they can enter the millennial Shabbat as mortals. Now, they're going to be extraordinary mortals. They're going to be cleansed and prepared to be in God's presence come Teruah and Kippurim for Yahweh's and Dode's return. And they will enter the millennial Shabbat and enjoy the conditions of Eden. But they will not be immortal. They will not start as covenant. They have a lot to learn, to accept, to understand, to acknowledge, to act upon before they can be considered covenant. And God's going to want to filter out the souls that don't belong. And they're going to have children, and they're going to be put through the same process. And then there's going to be Goyim, who are the workers of the millennial Shabbat, who have been brought there because they were not overtly political or religious, and therefore they were salvageable. And the same thing will be true for them. And so Dode will be the king of this mortal remnant of Yisrael, just as he is the leader of those who are covenant in Shamayim. And so it is important to know that he is going to be enthroned in both places and for all time. And everyone that is in either of those places will eventually have him to thank for it. For example, 100% of those who participate in the Bikurim, Shabuah, and Teruah harvest will have done so because of Dode's sacrifice on Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. We will all be grateful to him. We will all owe our lives to him. That's going to put him in a pretty good position. Now, as relates to this millennial gathering of mortal remnants of Yisrael and the Goyim, they are going to witness Yahweh authorize Dode as his king for his people. And they're going to see Dode come back as brilliant as the sun, as Elyon in God's presence. And they're going to see the covenant family respond to Dode and to Yahweh. They're going to witness all of this. They're going to experience Dode's leadership in Eden. But it's only those who ultimately capitalize on what Dode did in Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim and become covenant that are going to be allowed into Shamayim, and then they will come to revere and respect Dode with the same degree of devotion and zeal that we do, the rest of us. If you wish to be there with him, it's important that you realize that where there is free will, there are also choices to be made and alliances to be established and broken. Job chose wisely, electing to closely examine and carefully consider Yahweh's Torah, his 119th Mizmor Psalm, and also the 19th, but particularly the 119th with its 22 stanza alphabetic presentation of the Torah remains one of the crowning achievements of his life. I would encourage you to consider it as it is presented in the Torah teaching volume of An Introduction to God, free at yada.com. For those not as well informed, for those misled by the likes of Paul, Akiba, and Muhammad, or by Marxists or MAGAs, they will face the consequence of having chosen poorly, and in particular, Yehudim, the direct descendants of Dod. This is what God says. However, if his children, if the descendants of Dod, continue to forsake, ignore, or reject my teaching and guidance, my Torah, my source of instructions and directions, and if they make a habit of failing to walk according to my means to justly resolve disputes and exercise good judgment, if they perpetually view my clearly communicated prescriptions for living with content, chukah, and further, if they consistently fail to observe the instructive terms of the covenant relationship, mitzvah, shamar, then I will hold them accountable with the full measure of their religious rebellion and popular political revolt. Now, this is stated by God, knowing what Dod wrote in the 119th Mizmor, because Dod in the 119th Mizmor uses 4 terms to describe the way that the Torah should be understood, should be observed, and 3 of those 4 terms make their way into this statement. And I will share them with you as we go through it a second time. So God is saying that this opportunity awaits those who respect what Dod has achieved, who closely examine and carefully consider everything that Dod has written and accomplished in his lyrics and lives. However, his descendants, Jews, if they continue to forsake, ignore, or reject azab's a really bad word. If they habitually neglect and abandon, depart from, and disavow my Torah teaching and guidance. So Jews said, no, we're all Torah observant. Bull. You're not Torah observant. You're Talmud observant. If you were Torah observant, you would know how bad a situation you're in. Because in the Torah, it is one horrible story after another of just how bad everyone from Abraham to Jacob, to his 12 sons, to the children of Israel during the Exodus, to the kings, how everybody has been. It's just one horrible shit show after another. I mean, that's the best explanation of it. During the Exodus, Jews were obnoxious. They were repulsive in their statements to God. I mean, not only did they begin the whole process by making a goddamn golden calf and act religious after God freed them from religion. But thereafter, when God says, listen, I'm going to come down, Moshe, I'm going to do something extraordinary for you. I'm going to introduce myself to the children of Israel, all 600,000 of them. And, well, that's the ones who had already been killed for the golden calf episode. And I'm going to demonstrate tangibly, realistically, in your presence by appearing and speaking directly to the children of Israel that I, as God, Yahweh, am the one who am inspiring you and supporting you. And so I'm going to give you 3 days to get them all cleaned up and all ready for this meeting. I don't want to sneak up on them. I want them to be as prepared as possible. God does as he promised. He always does. And he came down and made this declaration that he, as Yahweh, was supportive of Moshe, that he had picked him to communicate this instruction and guidance to them. And what did the children of Israel say?
Shut up and go away.
That is exactly what you said.
Wow.
Shut up and go away. We don't want to see you again. We don't want to hear from you again. We'd rather die. And it's hard to say that it got worse from there, because how does it get worse from there?
It does get worse.
But it does get worse from there. The whole story of the Torah from that point on is worse from there. And so what we have found is that the Torah is not a history book. It's a prophetic book. It doesn't just speak to Israel the way Israel was, but to the way Israel is. Yahweh's Torah, you're not paying attention to. If you did, you would know Yahweh's name and you'd be using it. If you did, you would know that the Talmud is an absolute lie. If you did, you would know that Judaism is like making that golden calf all over again. If you did, you would know there's no sanction for a rabbi. If you did, you would know there's no sanction for a 9-candle menorah. If you did, you would know there's no sanction for anything that you're celebrating. You have all 7 of Yahweh's festival feasts wrong. His Moed, you do every single one of them wrong because you're not Torah observant. And then you layer on a bunch of religious mumbo jumbo, doing nothing but irritating God. If you were actually Torah observant, you wouldn't be in this mess. You wouldn't be a year away from the time of Israel's troubles, where 2 of every 3 Jews are going to die. You wouldn't be estranged from God. You would know him. You wouldn't be looking for a nameless Messiah. You would know your Messiah. You wouldn't be searching for salvation in all the wrong places because you would know the source of it. So when God said, you're in this pickle because you continue to forsake, ignore, and reject my Torah guidance, he knows what he's talking about. When he spoke a couple of centuries thereafter through Hosea, who he instructed to marry a temple prostitute so that he would have empathy for Yahweh's plight, that Israel was a religious whore, and that God was going to divorce Israel. And he wrote a formal letter of divorce to Israel. And he says, I'm leaving you. I'm going to have nothing to do with you. I will return when you return to me. And that still has not occurred. And rather than this message to Israel that Dod is the Messiah, the Son of God, and the Savior, there was no Jesus. That Yahweh was God's beloved, one and only name. That Maimonides was wrong and you're 97 years off on your calendar, and that got only 8 years left. Explaining exactly what happened in 33C with the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, Makodim, which should be glorious to the ears of Israelis. The fact that God has made a promise that he's returning to Israel and that there will be a mortal remnant of Israelites who are not overtly religious or political, who will be purged of what religion and politics that they have absorbed inadvertently, and that they are going to return to the conditions experienced at Eden, and that your last battle is only 8 years away, and God's going to fight it and prevail for you, and that there will be no Muslims, no religious Jews, no Christians, no Marxists left anywhere in the world. And you would think that to being able to prove that would be embraced by Jews in Israel. And yet I get rebuked. It's just like every one of Yahweh's prophets. They've never been accepted. They're always rebuked. Dod was not accepted. He's God's beloved son. Moshe was not accepted. Jews turned on him, trashed him, tried to stone him, wanted to condemn him to death. It was so bad, Moshe agreed. He says, God, why don't you just kill me? These people are obnoxious. I can't handle them. No one can lead them. And you're still doing that to this day. The only difference is it's going to get so bad for you over the next 8 years that you're going to have no one else to turn, and you're finally going to listen to what I'm telling you. That's the only difference. The fact is, they all gave up. I'm not going to. No matter how obnoxious you continue to be. Spit in my face and see if I flinch. Be the next Yar who writes me after I tell Israel, warn them about who they choose to exonerate in the case of Kirk, and who demean me for telling you the truth. Be the next one and see how I respond, exactly how I responded to him. Aggressively, holding him accountable for what he just said. And I'm going to continue to do it. And in about 4.5 years, I'm going to be doing it with the greatest orator of all time, Elia. Oh, that should give some street cred, don't you think? I don't know. You know, you would think that if you were Israel, rather than admiring a man who blamed 10/7 on Netanyahu, as opposed to Islam, rather than a man who blamed Epstein on the Mossad, rather than a man who blames America's immigration problems on Jews, that you would respect a man who has received thousands of death threats because he wrote the most comprehensive and irrefutable text on the nature of your actual enemy, Islam. No one knows more about it than I do. And I've offered 4,200 pages of absolute proof that Islam is your enemy and how to confront them, how to prevail against them. You'd think you'd be appreciative. Or the man who is telling you that when you say, I love Kirk because he promoted Judeo-Christian values, and he tells you it's utter nonsense. The Christian New Testament demonizes Jews. It dehumanizes them. It is grossly anti-Semitic, which is why Jews were subjugated and persecuted by the Roman Catholic Church for 18 centuries. It's why the Holocaust happened. Somebody that actually points out the truth to you, you can't process it. When somebody tells you that I can prove and have proven that rabbis created the Quran, and that without rabbis selling Muhammad their Talmud stories, Islam would not exist today to terrorize you as they did on 10/7, and I prove it, and you yawn. What's wrong with you? It's just like God coming off Mount Horeb to tell you, I'm God, I'm the one who is giving you this information, and you tell him to go,
shut up and go away.
Shut up and go away. What's wrong with you? Not only do they ignore my Torah, by the way, it's not Moshe's Torah. It's not the Jewish Torah. It's not law. It's from Yara. It means source from which instruction, direction, teaching, and guidance flow. You've been lied to by the rabbis on that too, haven't you? And if they make a habit of failing to walk, and Judaism is called halakha, the walk, and yet they're walking away from God. They're not following the walk that Yahweh prescribed. What is the walk that Yahweh prescribed? It is opening the door called life, Pesach, stepping across the threshold of matzah into Bikurim, through Shabuah and Teruah to Kippurim for the benefit of Sukkah. And you don't know what a single one of those 7 steps represent. You don't know when they were fulfilled or will be fulfilled or by whom or why. You don't know anything about walking to Yahweh. You're walking away from him. He says, according to my means to justly resolve disputes. Mishpat. Oh, that's a tremendous part of Dode's 119th Mizmor. And you haven't got a clue what the word means. Do you know the word is a compound of 2 very simple words? My, which means to ponder the implications of something, and shafat, to judge, to decide, to exercise good judgment, to resolve disputes, to be discerning. So what is God saying? You're not paying any attention to my Torah guidance, and you're failing to walk according to my means to resolve disputes. Again, Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim. Rather than death, you have life. Rather than being guilty, you are not guilty. Rather than being estranged, your family, as a result of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. And Dode fulfilled all three in 33 CE. He not only wrote in first person about how he was going to do that in the 22nd and 88th Mizmor. He's not only acclaimed for having done it throughout the prophet Yeshaya, Isaiah, but he himself came as Gabriel, God's most courageous and compassionate man, and capable man, and told us exactly when, why, and where he was going to arrive in his second of three lives to fulfill Chag Matzah, giving us the exact date in 33 CE, 600 years in advance, even describing in his own hand how crucifixion kills 700 years before crucifixion even existed. And you can't put it together? To understand that is God's means to justly resolve disputes, and you can't put this statement together with what God has just said about his beloved son, Dode, and his role in all of this? Why are you unable to think your way through this? Why can't you, mishvat, exercise good judgment? If they perpetually view my clearly communicated prescriptions for living with contempt. Chuka. It's from chuk. Chuka means to engrave, means to cut in. It is a prescription for living. What are the prescriptions for living? They are the conditions of the covenant, which is the very next word here, which is mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah. There is no V sound in the original Hebrew vocabulary or alphabet. It's a wa. It's mitzvah. It speaks of instructive terms of a relationship. They are the six or the five terms and conditions of the covenant. You have to meet them to be part of the covenant. It's not a Jewish thing. It is a Torah thing. And they're all laid out in Bereshith, Genesis. And I've written 3 volumes just to explain them to you as to what those conditions are. And it is the chuka, this inscription of these engraved prescriptions for living, which you need to consistently observe as the terms of the covenant relationship that matter. And if you don't, you're excluded. You're going to die. If you are a rabbi and you lead people away from it, you're going to go to Sheol. If you practice a religion that cares nothing about them and steals God's beloved son and Messiah from him, well, if you're just fooled by it, your soul will simply die upon your death. If you promote it, you're going to Sheol. There's a lot at stake here. This is God speaking to you. You need to pay attention. If you don't care, then just go away. Stop being a rabbinic Jew. Stop being a Christian. Stop being a Muslim if you don't care what God said, because it's obnoxious to say that your religion is based upon the Torah and the prophets and then contradict what God said. That's being obnoxious. That's upsetting to God. That is irrational. That is immoral. That is inappropriate. If you want to have a religion and you want to pretend that your religion has no correlation whatsoever to the creator God of the universe, to the God of the Torah, the prophets, and the Psalms, go ahead, but that's not Christianity, because Christianity misappropriates everything he said and twists it. That sure as hell's not Judaism, because they do the same thing. That's not Islam, because, well, that's a copy of the Talmud, and therefore it does the same thing. The 5 conditions of the covenant are to walk away from Babylon, which is this integration of religion and politics that is so confounding to people. to walk away from your family's home, which is the family of man, and societal customs, to walk away from your country, which is this notion of patriotism and politics. You must walk away from those things before you have any chance of coming to know God or being part of his family. You can't be in heaven and be religious. Full stop. You can't get to heaven if you're overtly political. When I expose and condemn the likes of Donald Trump, I'm telling you that if you're overtly political and you're a MAGA and you worship this fool, this pervert, then you are excluding yourself from heaven and distancing yourself from God. That's the first condition. The second is to walk to God and allow him to perfect you. And that only happens through Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. And it's on Matzah that your soul is perfected. And only if you accept the terms of the covenant and you understand the role Dowd played to fulfill these 3 dates. And you acknowledge there was no Jesus, there was no Bar Kokhba, that the rabbis and the pastors and the priests are dead wrong. And then God says, trust and rely on him, as opposed to your religion, as opposed to politics, as opposed to your IDF, as opposed to your military, as opposed to your political party. You have to trust and rely on him. And that means you need to come to know him. And that starts with acknowledging his name, Yahweh. And then he says, the next step is, I don't want to take anybody into heaven to be with me forevermore unless that individual is committed, that they are observant, that they're closely examining and carefully considering these very mitzvah, these instructive terms of the relationship. You need to know what they are, why they're there, agree with them, accept them, act upon them, for you to benefit from what God is offering. And last, to appreciate the covenant, God says, I have a sign. And that is, if you're a man, you're going to be circumcised. And as parents, you are to circumcise your sons on the 8th day. That is the sign of the covenant. If you don't like that sign, go away. I can have in the past talked for hours as to why God chose that sign. But does it really matter? God chose it. You would either accept it or you're not allowed into his home, which is heaven. So, your choice. Accept it or not. By the way, just accepting it won't get you in, but not accepting it will get you excluded. So, your choice. Then I will hold him accountable to the full measure of the religious rebellion and popular political revolt. Pesha is not a personal crime. As a matter of fact, almost everything that Yahweh speaks of as being associated with guilt or sin or a crime is global. It is throughout the community. He very seldom speaks of an individual offense that is something that needs to be overcome. What he speaks of is things like Pesha, which is rebellion, political revolt, religious malfeasance, chitta, this guilt that's associated with the criminal behavior of misleading people. It is that religion and politics that God says, I'm going to hold you accountable to the full measure of this because you're not observing my Torah, my directions, my teaching. And don't kid yourself again, Jews. You're not Torah observant. There isn't 1/100th of 1% of Jews who are Torah observant. They're Talmud observant. They look right past the Torah, or they would know Yahweh's name. They would use it. They would know that God has 7 Moed Mikra and what they represent and wouldn't have anything else on their religious calendar. They wouldn't be religious because God hates religion. The consequence of their deviation from the way and of their religious corruptions, Awon, their perversity, their depravity, their propensity to twist, will be a pestilence which causes widespread death. That's God's view of politics and religion. And I don't think there's any people on earth that are more political or religious than Jews. And second unto them would be if you wanted to combine religion and politics, it would be Muslims and it would be MAGAs. And the truth is, Marxism has been turned into a belief system. It has all the same passions and vicious responses of belief systems. So you got the Marxists, the MAGAs, the Muslims, Judaism, Christianity, all of it. All of it. God calls it a widespread fungus from which many people are going to die. Oh, by the way, do you know the name of the man that Yahweh called the plague of death? Because he named a man that he said would be the plague of death. He actually named the man who he said would be the plague of death, and then described the reasons he called him that, detailing his life 666 years before he wrote his first letter.
That would be Shaul.
Yeah,
Paul.
Also known as Paul. Yes, he introduces himself as Shaul, but he is Paul. He is the author of the first 14 books of the Christian New Testament. He's the one who conceived the concept of a gospel, and the first two gospels, Mark and Luke, are the gospels according to Paul. He's the one who created the myth of Jesus. God called him the plague of death, calling him out by name as Shaul, being the plague of death. So according to God, souls who neglect God's Torah guidance die. The consequence of ignoring Yah's teaching is to endure the plague of death. To reject God's guidance is to be held accountable for your own decisions, your words, and your actions. There is no getting around this. Not with the Talmud, not with Gospels, certainly not with the Quran. And remember, this instruction from God is being offered at the midst of a song sung solely to introduce us to the importance of Dowd as the Messiah, as the Son of God, as our Savior, as the sacrificial lamb of Passover, as the chosen one, as the man who made the benefits of the covenant possible. The Torah is the key to heaven, and it is held by Dowd. It opens heaven's door, providing the means to resolve the disputes through Passover and unyeasted bread, along with an introduction to the Mikra within the Torah, where we find Yahweh's clearly communicated prescriptions for living, just as Pesach and Matzah lead to Bikurim and make Shabuah and Teruah possible. We Teruah in advance of Kippurim to enjoy Sukkah with Dowd's father and with ours, now reconciled and at home. To deviate from Yahweh's Torah teaching through religious rebellion has a devastating consequence, causing widespread death. Consider the fate of Jews, just since the failure to accept Dowd's guidance in this regard as proof. Over the last 3,000 years, it has been dreadful. There are no shining white moments. I mean, yeah, you had a brief period with a couple of kings. It might have lasted weeks, maybe 6 months, and then was back to the same old religiosity and politics. And it was one attack after another, one devastating blow after another, being a slave here, being a slave there. It's the story of what happens when we not only as a people reject what God is offering, but thumb our nose at him. Israel, you've been given the bird to God for 3,000 years. Now, those who are infected by Paul's plague of death will also die as a result of it. The New Testament is dead wrong. Annulling the Torah, forsaking, ignoring, and rejecting Yahweh's teaching and guidance is asinine. There is no cure for stupid on this scale. There is no salvation for those who fail to observe and appreciate God's means to resolve disputes through the Mikra, or who hold his clearly communicated prescriptions for living in contempt. The same is true for those who would use replacement foolology to erase the legacy of the Messiah and the Son of God. which is the utter complete basis of Christianity. Without replacement foolology, there is no religion. Yahweh's mercy is afforded to the thousands amongst billions who embrace the instructive terms of his relationship agreement. It's our choice, but we will be held accountable for those we continue to make these choices that we continue to make about father and son. Those who would ignore or forlorn what was attributed to Dowd to salvage their religious beliefs are just simply not listening. They're not thinking. They will either change their minds or they are out of their minds. Now, continuing to speak of his beloved son in first person, the voice singing Dowd's song is Yahweh, God. And he said, accordingly, well, my unwavering love, enduring devotion, unmitigated favoritism, affection, and generosity, chesed, I will never remove or withdraw from him, because I will never communicate something which is not true, nor will I ever contradict my steadfast commitment to the truth. Holy mackerel. Excuse my swearing. Don't mean any harm to mackerels, and holy is a religious term and it means deceased. So probably a wrong response, but pardon my indiscretion. That was Mizmor 89:33. I should have just said, wow. Probably an overused word in this case, but think of this in context. God has just spent some 20 statements where he has said, Dowd is everything. He is my son. He is the Messiah. His throne endures forever. He is the former and returning king. He is my chosen one. He is the one who enables the Mikre. He is the Zeroah and therefore the sacrificial lamb. He is the most set apart one, that he is the object of my devotion. And then God says, you're all going to pay a dear consequence by not paying attention to my Torah guidance. And that I have prescriptions for living, and I have instructive conditions of the covenant for you to partake in, and you need to start exercising good judgment regarding these things. And if you don't, I'm going to hold you accountable. And then he goes right back to my unwavering love, my enduring devotion, my unmitigated favoritism. I will never withdraw or remove from him. Put those things together. That means the Torah is being fulfilled by Dowd. That means that Dowd is providing the means to resolve disputes. That means that Dowd is the living embodiment of what it is to mitzvah, to know the terms and conditions of that covenant relationship, that he embodies them. That's what this means. Now, I shouldn't be the first person to figure that out or tell you that, but that's what it means. That means that God is never going to change as it relates to Dowd. That means there can never be a Bar Kokhba. There can never be a Jesus ever associated with God. There can never be a Maimonides, and a Rabbi Akiba, a Paul, a Peter, a Luke, a Mark, Muhammad. Never. Because God is never withdrawing from Dowd, who is the Messiah, who is the Son of God, who is the former and returning King, who is our Savior. He says, I will never communicate something which is not true, nor will I ever contradict myself. And what is it that is required in Christianity? Because there is not a single statement about Jesus anywhere. Not even a hint of a Jesus. Not a single prophecy related to a Christ or to a Jesus. They have to rob everything God said about Dowd. And how do they do that? They contradict what God said. That's what they do. Your entire religion, Christianity, is based on a negation of this statement. Everything. There is nothing to the religion that isn't a contradiction of what God just said. It's that blunt. And can't you see it? Why does faith trump evidence and reason? Why would you believe Paul over God? Why is the same thing true with rabbis? Why is there a single follower of Judaism? I mean, you listen to what Jews say about Judaism, and you just want to shake your head and say, nobody can be that stupid. Really? You're claiming this is the basis of your religion, and you attribute it to God when God said the opposite about everything that you claim? I mean, you're claiming that God was senile. You're claiming that God couldn't remember what he said one moment to the next. You're claiming that what God said doesn't matter, that you're free to override it with whatever it is that you wish to impose. And while you are free to do those things,
Stupid is as stupid
it comes
does.
at a hell of a consequence. Literally, a hell of a consequence. And God wasn't finished. I will never dishonor. I will never betray. I will never poke holes in. Lo chalal. I will never defile by treating as if it were common and thus not uniquely special, holding in contempt, sullying, or desecrating. And I will never perforate, creating loopholes and which violate the nature of Berethani, my covenant family. Well, if God says that, how can there be a new covenant? How can there be a New Testament? How can there be a gospel of grace? How can there be a church? How can there be a Christian? God's saying, I am never going to dishonor. I will never betray. I will never poke holes in. I will never violate any aspect of my covenant family. What, you want to call God a liar? But that's what's required for Judaism, for Christianity, and for Islam to exist. You're calling God a liar. The covenant reigns supreme. There is one of them. The terms and conditions were narrated with Abraham. I've just shared with you what the 5 conditions are. They were all enabled by Dod's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. They're all explained in the Torah. There is no other source of the covenant other than the Torah. Without the covenant, there is no life. Without the covenant, there is no earth. Without the covenant, there are no people. Everything God created was for this covenant. And the firstborn of this covenant is David. You understand that? That when you start reading the story of God creating the universe and of the earth and of conceiving life and ultimately conceiving man and placing Adam and then later Chawa in the garden, it's all about God having a family. The story of the flood is about the same thing. The whole purpose of Abraham and Sarah and Yishak and Jacob is exactly the same thing. And it's the story that is the heart and soul of Bereshith, Genesis. I mean, it is half of the book is this one story of the establishment of the covenant family. And God said, I got one of them. And the one I have, I will never sully. I'm not going to change it. I'm not going to poke holes in it. And that means there can't be a renewed covenant. There can't be a New Testament. There can't be a Jesus. There can't be a Christ. There can't be a Christian. There can't be a church. There can't be a Bar Kokhba. There can't be a Rabbi Akiba. There can't be a Talmud. There can't be a Zohar. None of it. And we literally cease to exist without this covenant. It is the only means to eternal life. You cannot benefit from Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim and gain eternal life, perfection, and adoption into God's family without first accepting the terms and conditions of the covenant. God says, nor will I ever alter, disguise, or change. Walo Shana. I will never rearrange, modify, adjust, or duplicate that which has gone forth from my lips. That means there can't be a second covenant. There is one. Period. End of conversation. No possibility of a Christianity, no possibility of a Judaism, no possibility of an Islam. One covenant. God's not going to alter it, disguise it, or change it. Not for you, not for anyone. Mizmor 89:34. Oh, and then, my friends, this is what God says next. Echad, there is only one. Does one mean?
One. That's all it means.
That's what I thought. Echad, one. There is only one. To whom I have affirmed the truth by having made a promise. Shabbat. Kodeshani. By my uniquely set apart nature. If not to Dode, the beloved, then you're calling me a liar. Then I have communicated that which is not true and is deceptive and false. And I will have failed through deception and delusion. Mizmor lyrics to be sung, 89:35.
Checkmate.
Checkmate's over. Just over. You can take Judaism and throw that damn religion in the trash where it belongs. You can take Christianity and send it off to hell. You can dispense with Islam as just an utter and obnoxious lie. It's over. There is no Jesus. There is no Mr. Christ. There is no Muhammad speaking for God. There is no Rabbi Akiba as the father of Judaism. God says there is one, and that one has a name, and that name is Dode. Now, if you say, well, I don't know about a Dode. What's a Dode? Oh, you obnoxious idiot. Dode's name appears 1,100 times, second only to Yahweh's name. You don't know Yahweh's name, so I guess you don't know Dode's name either. Keep it in the family, right? Father and son, you don't know either one of their names. Yahweh and Dode. It's written 1,100 times. Of those, 70% of those times, it's written Deleth, Wa Deleth. That's a word in Hebrew. It means beloved. It's his name because he is beloved. You'll find his name, by the way, in your name if you happen to be a Jew, because the basis of Jew is Yahud, Yahweh, and Dode. It is written Deleth, Wa, Yod, Deleth, about 300 times. In all of those times, it is written by people who were at least 3 centuries or 4 centuries removed from Dode. Every time that is written in Dode's hand in a Mizmor, written by Yahweh for Dode, and this psalm, written by the great prophet Yashaya. Oh, you have the entire scroll, Yashaya. Why don't you look up and see how the name is spelled in Yashaya? You got a whole shrine to the great Isaiah scroll. Why don't you check it out? It's Dode. Why don't you look at every single psalm, Mizmor, that Dode wrote and see how he spells his name? Do you think that the smartest man who ever lived, the one that God says he is the one, he is the one, do you think that one would know how to spell his own name?
You would think so.
You think so. I'm going out on a limb here.
You're reaching.
There is no David. It's Dode. The name means beloved. It's integrated into Yahud. He's first introduced in the Torah. He is the subject of Devarim 18. There is only one, to whom I have affirmed the truth by having made a promise, by my unique set-apart nature, and if not to Dode, the beloved, I will be proven a liar. Do you think God lied?
No.
Ever? But let's just,
No.
Okay, let's just pretend that God lied. Just for a moment, just for arguments, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Okay? Let's pretend that God lied. Then could the religion of Judaism be true, since it claims that they're Torah observant and that their Talmud was arguments on the Torah.
No.
Zero possibility. There's no chance at all,
Can't
if God
happen.
lied, that the Talmud or Judaism can be true. Right?
Right.
And if God told the truth about Dowd here and about his Torah guidance, is there any chance that Judaism and the Talmud can be true, since they contradict it?
No.
So it's a lose-lose, isn't
It's
it?
a lose-lose.
All right.
They're always looking for their...
Let's go into Christianity. Christianity claims that Dowd is dead, buried, and out of heaven.
Yep.
And that Jesus was the Savior, and that Jesus was the Messiah, and Jesus was the Son of God. And it condemns the Torah. So, if God was telling the truth, what does it say about Christianity?
They're contradicting themselves. They're liars too.
So there's zero possibility that Christianity can be true if God was telling the truth.
Nope. They're always looking for loopholes.
Okay, so when Christianity wants to prove that Jesus is something, where do they go?
They go to the Torah.
They go to the Torah, the prophets, and Psalms, right?
Yep.
And they misquote the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. So if God lied and the Torah, prophets, and Psalms are not true, can Christianity be true?
There's no possible way.
So it's lose-lose for Christianity,
Exactly.
isn't it? And of course, Islam is just a bunch of regurgitated Talmud stories that are even twisted further out of recognition. So when Allah says that the Quran confirms the Torah, no matter whether God was telling the truth or not, it's no possibility. It's absolutely false.
Absolutely.
That's why I can say that Allah was not God.
Absolutely.
And that I can say Muhammad was not a prophet. And I can say that Jesus never existed.
Exactly.
And you know something? No one can prove me wrong, because I am absolutely right in all of those claims. And I stand with Yahweh. That's bottom line here. I'm telling you what Yahweh said. And based upon what Yahweh said, there was no Jesus. There was no Mr. Christ. There is no credibility whatsoever to the Christian New Testament, or to Rabbinic Judaism, or to the Talmud, or to the Zohar, or to the Quran. It's all gone. There is one that matters. He happens to be Dowd. He lived 3 lives. 2 he's already lived. He lived as king. He lived as the Messiah. And then he became the very Son of God by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim when he came back 1,000 years later, and he wrote all about it. He's the only eyewitness to what he achieved, and he was an eyewitness 1,000 years in advance because he happened to be a prophet. And then he will return 2,000 years after that. Time is literally marked out on Dowd. He sits in the middle of time from being in the garden to returning to the garden. And then 2,000 years before the return, he fulfilled the first 3 Moed Mikre, and in year 6,000, he will fulfill the last of the Mikre.
You can set your calendar by it.
You can set your calendar by it. And you know exactly, because God's already said it, who is returning with him, and it is Dowd, and he is going to be as brilliant as the sun. He is going to be Elyon, everything pertaining to the influence of God in our midst. It is one. There aren't 2. And the one has a name, and it ain't Jesus. It's Dowd. Now, you would think if you were a Jew, you'd be celebrating this. You've been lied to, you've been fleeced, you've been hounded, you've been controlled by the rabbis, and now I have proven that they're liars, and that the truth is available to you, and it's being freely offered to you, and it comes from the most Yehud of all Yehud who have ever lived. And now you know who your Messiah is. Now you know who your king is. You know when he's returning. You know what he's offering. You can live forever. You can be part of the covenant. You can enter Shamaim. All of this is being offered to you. You want to be obnoxious and spit in my face? Treat me like Moshe? Treat me like Dowd. You rebelled against Dowd. All of the men of Israel did. You rebelled against Dowd. You rebelled against Moshe. All the men of Israel did. Even the women. You want to continue to be like that? Well, why don't you consider what happened to those who did? And maybe you want to make a different choice. I strongly encourage it. Now, by itself, this would rank among Yahweh's most influential statements. However, when it's combined with others he has made throughout Dowd's song, this 89th Psalm, God's citation speaks more pervasively and more passionately than anything ever said by God or man. These words are transformational. They are life-changing. Dode is the answer. He is the one. Dode is the answer. He is the one. Dode is the Messiah. He's the former and returning King. He is the sacrificial lamb of Passover. He is the exemplar of the covenant. He is the one who enabled the covenant. He is the firstborn son of God. It's probably a good place for us to conclude this program. We'll pick up this time tomorrow as we continue with Appalling Twistianity. Thank you, Rich, for encouraging me to come down here and do this. I was really frustrated by what I was witnessing, particularly among Jews.
What's going on in
and
Acts is
anti-Semites
disgusting.
in social media today. It is a bitter experience to have this role. I am treated just like Moshe and just like Dode, and I'm treated just like Yahweh, and so I'm in good company. But Israel, Goyim, you need to get your act together in a hurry. There's not much time left, and there's no one else willing to tell you the truth. And right now, you're naked and exposed, and your world is going to come crashing down on you in a hurry. Well, thank you for listening.